When I grew up, I thought my dad was super strong. He could do things that no one else could. Whenever he went to a restaurant, he was able to get himself moved to the front of the line. When a cop pulled my dad over, he was able to talk his way out of tickets. He was able to persuade people to buy things from him that they didn't even want. But there was something about my dad that was missing. There was something about my dad that allowed me to want to push him away. There was something about my dad that made me resist him, and I wasn't willing to consider his advice. You see, every once in a while, my dad was harsh, critical, uncaring, and overbearing. My dad would do and say things at times, and that made me not want to spend time in his presence. This morning, I want to talk to you about something that is profound and important. And if you apply what I'm talking about to your relationships, it will improve every single one of them. But if this one ingredient is missing, then your friends, your coworkers, and your family members will resist you, and they will not want to hear what it is that you have to say. I want to start by talking about something that is super important, but I want you to just look at this little girl's face. There's something about her that feels safe in the arms of her father. We're going to be talking about the fruit of gentleness, and gentleness is something that is powerful, but it's tender, it's soft, it's something that allows us to experience things in a way that we normally wouldn't be able to. Have you ever thought about what gentleness is? The first thing I want us to talk about is that the Bible tells us to let gentleness be evident to all. Now, there's this little phrase here that says, the Lord is near, and I'm not going to talk about what that means now, but I just want to point it out because we're going to come back to it later on in the sermon. But Paul tells us that we should let our gentleness be evident to all. He also says that blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And you're wondering why I have meek highlighted. It's the exact same word in the Bible in the Greek as gentleness. And what both Paul and Jesus say is that everyone should see your gentleness. And if you do it, then you will be able to inherit the earth. So at least we should consider gentleness. What is gentleness? Gentleness is a refuser to use your power and influence to harm anyone else. When you're gentle, you're considerate, thoughtful, tender, and you're able to consider other people's feelings. When you're gentle, you are refusing to hurt someone else in order to get what you want. Gentleness, in essence, is strength under control. When you're gentle, you're able to resist the ability to hurt somebody else just so you can get them to do what you want them to do. I love how both in Ephesians and in Colossians, God encourages fathers to be careful not to exasperate your kids. He also says that we should pay attention so that we don't do things that cause them to lose hope and get discouraged. I want you to think back to your childhood when you were growing up. For me, there was things that my dad did periodically. It wasn't all the time, but there were certain things that my dad did that was harsh and critical. And even though it's been 40 years since then, I still remember it as if it happened today. And I want to talk to you dads for just a second. Have you ever been harsh or critical or pushed through barriers to get your kids to do something that you want? Because God warns us that if we're not gentle, then it'll cause our children to not only resist us, but to lose hope and to become discouraged. In Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1, this is a passage I like to quote all the time. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. If you think about it, there's two different end results depending on how you respond to somebody else. If you respond to somebody by giving a gentle answer, it'll turn away their anger. But if you respond to anger with more anger, then it's going to escalate it and make things worse. Through patience, a ruler can be persuaded, and a gentle tongue can break a bone. That's Proverbs 25:15. A different way of saying it is that there's something that is so powerful about being gentle that you have the ability to persuade someone that is stubborn and hard-hearted. Now, I want you to think with me for a second about stuff that happens to all of us. When we're in a conflict with somebody else and they start to escalate the argument, they start to raise the intensity, increase the volume of their voice, how do you respond? When someone else is doing things and they're starting to get really loud and they're talking at you and they're criticizing you and pointing out what's wrong with you, do you raise your voice to match the volume of their voice? And do you raise your intensity to match the volume of their intensity? I think all of us have done it. Every single one of us have had opportunities where in the midst of the chaos, we allow things to get escalated and become worse and worse. What God says is that if you're gentle, then not only can you bring the temperature down, but you could come to a resolution. Why should you consider allowing God's Spirit to develop gentleness in you? Because you will avoid doing damage to the people that you care about. Sometimes it's a thoughtless, it's a careless word. It's you're trying to get someone that matters to you to do something, and instead of being patient, you force your way in and you demand that action immediately that causes pain for a lifetime. I've had people sit into my office, and as they try to tell the story of what their moms and especially their dads have said to them, it causes them significant pain even today. And I want you to think about if you were to consider allowing God to build gentleness in you, can you imagine the hurt that you could save the people that you care about? Can you imagine how much damage you would not have to go back and undo? This is a phrase that I kind of say to myself all the time, is that people that are abrasive are not persuasive. And here's what I mean. They may get what they want, but you're not going to want to spend time in their presence, and you are going to resist their influence. So even though they're like sandpaper and they're harsh and they cause irritation, they ultimately will not get what they want, and you won't want to be around them. Another relational principle that's really important is the higher the intensity, the lower the understanding. What happens is when we get in a conflict and we're trying to get people to do what we want and they're not paying attention to us, we raise the intensity so that they'll hear us and they'll understand what we want from them. The problem is that the higher you raise the intensity, the lower the understanding is going to be. I love in 1 Peter chapter 3 because Peter is talking to women, specifically women who are believers whose husbands are not. And he says to believing women that there is this untapped power, if you pay attention to it, that will influence your husbands in ways that I could never imagine. Peter says that if you pay attention to this one principle, you will have significantly greater influence. He says, wives, in the same way submit to your husbands, and he goes back to how all of us are supposed to submit to each other, and that's how Jesus did things. He goes on and he says that they will be won over without words. Ladies, I want you to just think about this for a second. You can win over your husbands without words, and here's how. With a gentle and quiet spirit. There's something powerful about gentleness that allows you to get farther, that gives you greater influence, that allows you to accomplish something significantly greater than you could do any other way. Whenever you raise the intensity, you lower the understanding. Whenever you are abrasive, you are not only not persuasive, but people don't want to pay attention to what you're saying. First, you should consider becoming gentle because you'll avoid doing damage to the people that you care about, but you will also significantly increase your influence. I love John Wooden. He was a basketball coach for UCLA, and he was one of the winningest coaches of all time. And when he was growing up, he lived in rural Indiana. And his father often would go to the gravel pits, because that's what farmers did, is they would take their horses and their mules, and they would go to gravel pits, and they would haul gravel out of the pits. On most of those, the incline would be super high, and it was incredibly difficult to get the horses to pull them out. But on this particular day, not only was the incline extremely steep, but it had rained so that the sand was very wet. And I want to read you from his words what he learned that particular day. The young farmer was whipping and cursing those beautiful plow horses. He was trying to get them out of that incline when it was full of water and the sand was deep, and the horses were frothing at the mouth, stomping and pulling back from John's dad. And then eventually, after watching it for a while, John's dad said, "Is there any way I could just take him for a minute?" And the guy said, "Sure." So John's dad started talking to the horses, almost whispering to them, stroking their noses with a soft touch. Then he walked between them, holding their bridles and bits, while continuing talking very calmly and gently as they settled down. Gradually, he stepped out in front of them and gave them a little whistle to start them moving forward while he guided the reins. Within moments, those two big plow horses pulled the wagon out of the gravel pits as easy as it could be, and they were even happy to do it. John Wooden said, "I've never forgotten what I saw him do and how he did it. Over the years, I've seen a lot of leaders act like the angry young farmer who lost control. So much more can be accomplished by a calm, confident, gentle approach." Wooden took away an indelible lesson. It takes strength inside to be gentle on the outside. God understands strength under control. You see, in the entire Old Testament, God continually promises that one day a Messiah will come. One day the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords will come down to the earth. And in Zechariah chapter 9, we read how that king will come. When you think about it, the most powerful person in the history of the world was going to make his entrance into Jerusalem. He could have come with tens of thousands of angels. He could have come with an army. He could have demanded everybody pay attention. But God understands the power of being strong, but yet under control. Rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious. And the primary characteristic that God described when he was making his entrance into the earth was gentleness. Some of you are resisting it, and you're going, the last thing in the world I want to do is be gentle, because then I will not get what I want. I would argue that if you're not gentle, you may never get anything that you really want. Your king comes, you're righteous and victorious, gentle and riding on a donkey, and a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem. Not only will I be able to stop war, and the battle bow will be broken, he will proclaim peace to the nations. He will rule, extend from sea to sea, from river to the ends of the earth. Not only is gentleness the way that allows you to stop war, but it also gives you the possibility to accomplish peace. Jesus understood strength under control. In fact, there was something about Jesus that he knew that if you were thoughtful and careful and kind and tender, then it would bring people towards you. Now, in a practical way, if you had something stuck in your eye, who would you want to take it out? Would you want somebody who was rough and harsh and came in there and pushed through and forced it out? Or would you be more interested in someone who was tender and kind and compassionate and thoughtful. Now, if you're struggling with something and something's difficult and life isn't working the way that you want it, do you want somebody to come in and tell you exactly what you're doing wrong and prove to you how wrong you are and show you with harshness and criticism that you're not getting it right? Or would you be more open to somebody who's tender, who's kind, who's considerate? I just want you to think about this, because there is power in gentleness. There is power in taking time and being unwilling to hurt someone else in order to get what you want. I want to talk to the hearts of some fathers for just a second. Do your kids ever frustrate you? Are they ever not living up to your expectations? Are they ever doing something that you don't want them to do? I want you to consider that you can force your way and you can make them do it. But you're going to lose your influence, and they're going to resist your advice. I want to talk to some ladies just a second, okay? I understand that there's times when you're not connected to your husbands, and he is not paying attention to what you're saying. When you're harsh, or you're critical, or you point out all their flaws, not only will you not be persuasive, but you won't get what they want. I'm going to pick on somebody in the audience, and since I know Ron, and he'll forgive me for this if this goes badly, I'm going to say something to you, okay? Ron, you ready? Watch this. We need to talk. One harsh startup can change the entire conversation between a husband and a wife. Some of you husbands, your wife hasn't done exactly what it is you want her to do. If you lose your temper, or you're harsh, or critical, or mean, she may not even want to be near you. You see, there was something powerful about Jesus that brought rest to people's souls. You see, the way that Jesus described himself was gentle and humble at heart. There was something powerful about Jesus that made him not only approachable, but considerate and thoughtful and willing to not hurt other people to get what he wanted. Here's what Jesus said: "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened." And I just want you to sit with this, okay? "And I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for this is who I am. I'm gentle and I'm humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." When you're gentle, not only do you gain significantly greater influence, but people want to spend time in your presence. You see, when you're harsh, you won't be persuasive, and you might just temporarily get what you want, but they will resist you and they will not want you around. You see, there's something that is powerful about gentleness that not only gets results, but it makes people want to spend time in your presence. Why should you be gentle? Because you will not do damage to people's hearts. You won't have to go back and apologize for the actions that you've taken, and you won't be left with regrets. You also gain significantly greater influence, and people will want to hear what you have to say. But the thing that I want us to just sit with for a second is that you will become safe for people to draw close to. And they will want to spend time in your presence. When your kids get to be adults, do you want them to want to be around you? When you've been married for more than 25 years and your kids move out of the house, do you want your husband or wife to look forward to the opportunity of spending time with you, what I would consider and what I would ask you is that maybe exactly what you need is a little bit of gentleness. You see, gentleness is strength under control. When you're strong and when you have things in a way where you don't have to force your way, you can be considerate and patient and thoughtful and kind. In a minute, I'm going to pray for you, and I'm almost done with the sermon. But I don't want it to end quite yet, because I know there's some of you that are resisting. And this is the exact reason that your relationships are difficult, because you're persuasive, and you're bold, and you're powerful, and you can get what you want. But if you can add gentleness to it, the people in your life will also want to be around you. And they will be open to your influence and your advice. Would you pray with me? Dear God, I pray that you would be gentle with us, like you always are. God, you are humble, and you're patient, and you're kind, and you never force us to make changes. But it's that gentleness that leads us to want to be in your presence. God, at the beginning of the sermon, I read that our gentleness should be evident to all because the Lord is near. God, help us to understand that when we're gentle, that it makes people want to experience time in our presence. God, I pray for some people who realize right now that they have not been gentle, and I pray, God, that you would give them the willingness and the courage to make things right. God, for others of us, I ask that you would help us to consider allowing your Spirit to move in us so that we can experience what our hearts long for. God, I'm grateful that we get to talk to people who are open and willing and are receptive to what you say. Help us to become more gentle. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen.